I'm Luke Story. For the past 22 years, I've been relentlessly committed to my deepest passion, designing the ultimate lifestyle based on the most powerful principles of spirituality, health, psychology, and personal development. The Lifestylist Podcast is a show dedicated to sharing my discoveries and the experts behind them with you. Brian Hoyer, here we are back again, dude.
Yes, we are. And it's been a long time since we actually had an official podcast, but we've been in touch over the years.
Yeah, it's funny.
Been really fun.
When we talked about it the other day, I thought, well, he was just on. And then I realized, no, that was like 3 years ago or something at Paleo Effects, also here in Austin.
Yeah. Ironic how things kind of came back around to this location.
Yeah, and in that conversation, I remember asking you to do it, just met you on the fly there, and you were showing me some EMF meters and stuff like that with Brian from Sauna Space. And I remember something that was really interesting. We were downstairs on the concrete floor in the conference center, and you were showing me geopathic stress zones, and you had your dowsing rods, and we would walk across the floor, and then they would move as they do when you're crossing a magnetic field or a water vein underground. And it was so interesting. I don't know if you remember this. They corresponded with the cracks in the concrete.
Yeah.
Right?
They often do, yeah.
Yeah, that was so trippy. I was like, oh, man. And it shows the earth is moving under that foundation, I guess. And it's allowing space to emit that magnetic field to come up through the floor. It's really wild stuff. So here we are. You guys from Shielded Healing, your company, have been out here for the week, working super hard. And by the way, thank you so much. Every time I come to the house, I'm like, thank God I'm not helping, because it looks like hard work to EMF shield the bedroom and the other rooms that you're doing. And on that note, when I came in here today, I thought he could have just shielded the studio because it looks almost exactly the same.
Yeah. It's a dark black paint with carbon black and graphite. And yeah, it's dark. And you were in there the other day, and I always joke around with people when we're in the middle of a shielding project or something that for just at least a split second, sometimes over the course of a few hours, there's this little thought in the person's head that says, hey, I kind of like it black. Maybe we should leave it this color.
Right.
But then usually that thought just leaves their mind, like especially after having a conversation with the significant other or whatever. But
yeah, I don't think Allison would be down with the goth bedroom. But, it's funny you say that, because I did have that thought when I came in. I thought, man, talk about a, blackout room, like a great sleep environment. It would be really smart to black out your whole room and just eliminate all light, black out, and just make a cave, especially a Faraday cave. I am so excited, dude. Like, this is a dream come true. We did the EMF home safety masterclass based on videos that you and I made of coming and testing the old house in LA.
Yeah.
We found a lot of problems with that house. It wasn't really worth the investment to go full on. So I did a few little tweaks here and there to help bring the levels down and did what I could. But now that my name is on the loan, I don't say I own a house, because really the bank owns the house, let's face it. But now that my name is on the loan, I'm like, yes, I can finally do the house for real. And we're going to get into that. But before we do, I'd like to just ask you, what led you in the first place to get into learning about EMFs and how to fix it?
Starting off as a health practitioner was kind of a different angle than what a lot of people that are in the EMF professional shielding or mitigation industry, it's different than where they come from. Usually they're coming from an electrical engineering standpoint, or maybe just looking at homes and trying to create healthy homes. But I was looking at it more from the individual. I was, I'm a nutritional therapy practitioner, and I had a practice in California, and I was seeing like anywhere from 50 to 70 people on a regular basis, and trying to help them with their health, like gut healing protocols, blood sugar issues, adrenal fatigue, thyroid problems, all of those things. And in my continuing education, I learned from Dr. Klinghardt that EMFs is a big issue for people that have chronic health problems. And so one of the lectures that he gave in one of his seminars was really hit home to me that, I won't take on any patients unless they take care of the problem with EMF, the Wi-Fi in the house, the router, they filter the dirty electricity. He's got the German accent and everything.
Yeah.
But, so I was like, wow, he won't even work with somebody unless they do that. And he basically said they won't get better unless they take care of this issue. And so I started playing around with that with my clients and saw some amazing results. Like when we put in the solutions, they didn't have to be on a leaky gut protocol for 2 months or 3 months. It was like 2 weeks. Or sometimes they wouldn't need the supplements at all. They would just start getting better. Their symptoms would start improving. And so I realized that was a big deal and started implementing a lot of the solutions and trying to think about it more from this ancestral perspective of, as a nutritional therapy practitioner, we're always talking about nutrient-dense whole food. What did our ancestors eat? How do you respect your own individual biology and where your ancestors came from? Did they come from Latin America or did they come from Northern Europe? And so we want to eat more like what our ancestors ate like. But then, on the EMF side, we're always thinking about, okay, well, how about our environment? What was our ancestors' environment like? And that was a thought that kind of sparked in my head. And I realized that, we really have to think about the environment more in those terms and what was the magnetic and the electromagnetic environment that our ancestors had. We didn't have pulsating electricity. We didn't have artificial light at night. We didn't have, we had our feet connected to the ground during the day, and we had sunlight during the daytime as well. And then at night we would go into our mud hut, our cave structure, and we'd sleep insulated from the earth and also protected from any of the external frequencies that would be coming from distant stars that are like much more minute and small, minuscule compared to the types of frequencies that we're being exposed to today, and different waveforms. So most things that come from nature are constant, they're direct, it's analog.
Like the sun's radiation, for example.
Yeah, the sun is beaming down. There's no flickering of the sun. The only time our ancestors would have had flickering is running through a jungle in a stress response when there's sunlight kind of going through the leaves, and you have that strobe light effect, and that's a stress response. So now we have this imperceptible flicker because most of our lights are running on 60 hertz or 50 hertz in Europe, and people get headaches and all kinds of symptoms from that. And then our electricity is pulsing constantly as well and causing oxidative stress in our body because of the magnetism and the electric fields and also the wireless frequencies that are flowing through, stimulating our cells to produce an oxidative stressor. And it floods into the body, and it's not natural. And then we're not only that, but we're also insulating ourselves in many ways from the earth and going indoors and not getting enough sunlight. And so there's this, not only this introduction of all these artificial frequencies, but also the separation from nature that happens. And we're not getting the things that our body has been used to getting for thousands or millions of years, or whatever you believe the origins of humanity is,
Yeah, that's a good point. It's like, not only do we not have those positive inputs that support our biology, but we've then added all of these totally foreign or alien inputs, right? Like they call it like non-native blue light. It's like not of this planet. Nowhere on the planet does the narrow bandwidth of blue in an LED or fluorescent bulb exist. It's literally alien.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And you're not getting the full spectrum of the rest of the light, the invisible part, which is an infrared, near infrared spectrum as well. And that always comes in nature with the blue. There's never just blue light. It's infrared and blue light together. And
Right.
But the way that we have it set up, we have LEDs and fluorescent bulbs that give us some of the visible color, but it doesn't have much of the invisible color that you need to kind of combat some of the damage that happens with some of the visible light that you have that's more high energy, like blue light and UV light.
Let's break down the different types of EMF that you test for and help people to sort out.
Yeah. So light is a type of EMF. It's on the electromagnetic spectrum. There's visible light, and there's invisible light. So there's UV light that would be invisible, and near infrared and infrared energy light is invisible. And then there's the visible spectrum that we see, the colors of the rainbow. So that's a type of EMF. And what we're asking with each type is it natural? And so we're trying to match what's in nature. So under the EMF category, light, artificial light, is a type of EMF that we're testing for when we go into people's homes. And we're asking that question, what's natural? We want to match the outside light with the light environment inside as much as possible. And so we're looking at several different things with artificial light. We're looking at the spectrum, the flicker, and the intensity of the light. And all of those things are important because all of those things can cause physiological reactions in the body. The spectrum can cause you to produce the wrong hormone at the wrong time of day. And that's where, a lot of your listeners are very, very familiar with circadian biology and wearing the blue blockers and not looking at screens before bed and that sort of thing. So there's a spectrum, but then there's also the flicker. And that's what a lot of people don't get, because the flicker does cause a physiological stress response. It's a neurological stressor to the brain, even if you can't perceive the flicker by just looking at a light and telling you if it flickers. You can actually take a slow motion video of a light.
It's crazy,
and you can tell
dude.
that it's flickering.
It's crazy. If you go outdoors in a city, I used to do this in LA, and just make a slow-mo video and just film like all of the street lights, all of the neon lights, the store lighting, just any signage anywhere around. And it's literally like you, at that speed, you were in a discotheque. You have no idea, but your nervous system does, because it's trying to, it's like, think of your iris, right? It's automatically adjusting to changes in light, and it happens in an imperceivable way because usually the changes are slow, right? You go from in here to outside that's brighter, so they're going to shrink.
Yeah.
But I'm imagining that when that flicker is happening, your eyes are fast enough to track it. It's just you can't perceive that they're doing it. So
the brain's not fast enough.
Right. So but the eyes are still going trying to adjust to that. You just imagine how exhausting that is.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And it's interesting you say that, because in my work as a nutritional therapy practitioner, one of the functional tests that we do is called the pupillary response test. And you take a flashlight in a dark room and shine it at the person's pupil, and you see it dilate. And if the person's pupil starts to pulse, then it's a sign of adrenal fatigue. And so one theory that I have about how artificial light is very damaging to us is that it's taxing on the adrenals, because your eye and how it's connected to your hypothalamus and pituitary in your brain, and it's constantly getting information from the environment. And if it is always getting this flickering information from the environment, it actually gets fatigued and tired. And the flicker of the light is a stress response. And ancestrally, it is. The only time we get flickering light in that amount of pulsations would be when we're running through something and there's light coming through trees, or some other type of, or like a lightning storm where there's lightning all around. And usually when there's lightning all around you, flashes, people are scared in thunderstorms.
Right.
You've been in LA for a long time. Well, you're going to experience.
I'm like, what's a thunderstorm?
Yeah. You're going to experience some really intense thunderstorms here in Texas. It's scary. I mean, children are innately scared. My kids, they get scared when there's thunder and lightning outside, and they want to cuddle. They don't want to be outside. They might want to look outside and see the cool lightning, but there's something that's scary about the flashing light and the loud sounds and everything. And so, innately, our bodies don't want us to have those strong flashes, those pulsations. It's more like the sun rises slowly and then falls slowly, and there's a gradual change in the spectrum and a constant source of beaming of light from dawn to dusk. And everything in nature is very gradual like that, and our bodies are used to that gradual response of everything. And that's how our cortisol and our melatonin don't just spike up and go down unless we have some artificial input that makes it do that, because it's usually following the pattern with the sun. The cortisol goes up during the day and then goes down, and then melatonin goes up at night when the light goes away. And so we have a much more gradual response in nature versus we can just flip on a light and then all of a sudden, boom, it's there. And then you halt that melatonin production. You have a stress response, the cortisol goes up. And then you don't sleep as well that night, or it takes a lot longer to fall asleep. And I'm sure you've experienced that.
Oh my God, yeah, it's undeniable, especially after a few years of having only, amber colored bulbs in the house at night and using the various blue blockers and things like that. I mean, now we're in this apartment that we're renting, and I actually travel with incandescent light bulbs. Just the first thing I do in any hotel, Airbnb. I mean, it's nuts, but it's like once you get used to warm, non-flickering light, the other, like those really bright white, AKA blue LED lights, I mean, it just like hurts me.
Yeah.
I can't stand it. So the first thing I did in this apartment was go and switch them all out. But there are a couple of the ones that they're like built into the fixture and you can't change them.
Yeah, yeah.
So being, having some ingenuity in me, I went on Amazon and I bought some of those gels, like those amber colored gels, so that I can take the light like in the refrigerator apart and all the ones that are unchangeable and just put a film over them while I'm in there. It's a journey, but it really, those little things, they do add up. And I think it's really cool that you added the light piece to your work, because you had just started, I think you had one of the first little meters you had that tested the flicker rate and the temperature of the light. And I feel like you had a more sophisticated one this time.
Yeah.
And that's kind of become part of your EMF protocol then.
Yeah. So we have general recommendations like most people do in the biohacking community about blue light and everything. But not many people were talking about flicker until I started testing it like 3 or 4 years ago. And now like a lot more people are talking about flicker since we started testing that at people's houses. And then people go on the forums and all the different directions and ask questions about flicker. And then it becomes something more prominent in the community, in our wellness community, to talk about, And so what we like to do is make the assessments that we do as experiential as possible. And light is a really great way to convince people who are skeptical that EMFs are a problem or cause biological harm or affect you physiologically in any way, because it's something you can see. It's something that you can show them on a meter of what an LED looks like versus a fluorescent light. And you can ask people questions about, have you ever heard about somebody getting headaches being under fluorescent lights, or working in an office all day under the really bright, cool blue lights? And most people have personal experience where they can say, yeah, I don't feel good. I get headaches when I'm under that, or my eyes get tired, or whatever. And, there's even Harvard studies that talk about blue light being problematic for, not getting adequate sleep and lowering your melatonin production at night. So you could point to all those studies. Light is a much more accepted type of EMF, where it has a non-thermal and non-ionizing physiological effect on the body. And that's a type of electromagnetic frequency. And if you can get people to understand that, it doesn't have to be a thermal effect that damages the body. And it doesn't have to be an ionizing effect that can damage the body or cause abnormal physiological response. Then would it be possible that an electric field could do that, which is another type of EMF we test for from all the wiring in the walls? Would it be possible that a magnetic field could have a biological response on the body, since your body is full of minerals that all have a relationship with magnetism, where they're either aligning with the magnetic field or disaligning from it? And if every mineral in your body has a relationship with magnetism, could it be possible that these pulsating magnetic fields that are pulsing at 60 hertz are affecting your cells and causing them to abnormally respond when you're around those types of fields? And most people, you just think about it from that perspective and like, yeah, well, if we've never had those before, of course that can be affecting the body if all the minerals inside of us. I mean, we have iron in our blood, and you can actually, if you have a strong enough magnet, you can move blood around with a magnet. And when you think about it like that, it's like, of course that can have a physiological response if you're moving blood around. And, there's a lot of studies in the Indian tradition that talk about the direction of your head. And that's something we were talking about at your space too, is that when your head is facing south or east, you're less likely for the iron and the metals in your body to accumulate in the head. But if you're facing north or west, it's more likely for that to happen, because the magnetism of the earth is going in a certain direction, and there's iron or other metals that can accumulate in your head if you have your head facing a certain direction.
I'm so bummed about that, as I told you the other day, because the layout of my room is just perfectly situated for the bed to be at the north. I'm just like, God, I had it all planned out where the furniture is going to go. I don't know. I'm almost willing to take the hit just for aesthetics and the feng shui flow of like how you can easily get to the bed from both sides. But yeah, things like that are so subtle, and I think in many ways a lost art in our culture. Yeah. And we think of these things as, it's just some superstition as part of the Chinese medicine system or Ayurveda or feng shui. And it's like, well, if these things were around for thousands of years and they had no effect on people's lives, they wouldn't have lasted. Because think about all of the things that were just empty superstition that have gone by the wayside because people noticed, I don't know, it doesn't really make a difference.
Yep.
So there's got to be, unfortunately for me, something to it.
Yeah.
So with the light, another interesting thing about the light, in addition to the flicker and the spectrum of color in the light, is the placement of where the light is emanating from. And I never thought about this until I interviewed Alexander Wunsch, who's maybe the foremost experts on all things light in the world. I forget the episode number. We'll put it in the show notes. But he was explaining to me how horrible it is to have like those can lights on the ceiling directly above you. And I was like, who cares? Like, light's light as long as it's not flickering and it's the right temperature for the right time of day. And he said, no, the reason why, and it goes back to that ancestral piece, is that, there's maybe like one day a year where the sun is directly overhead and it's only there for 30 minutes or something, right? Like natural light, meaning sunlight, it's the only natural light, I guess, besides starlight or moonlight. It never exists in nature that it's like right above your head.
Yeah.
So I don't know what that does to you, but again, going back to how can we try to recreate a natural environment? That would be something too, is like the placement of those lights.
The placement of the lights, and that was something that I hadn't thought about when you talked to me about that the other day. But that's such a good point. And then one thing that I've discovered with testing with the new light meter that we have, which is it goes from 380 nanometers all the way up to 1050 nanometers. So we get into the near infrared range, and we go all the way down to like basically the top of the UV range. So you can see kind of if something has UV or not. But with those lights, one thing that's interesting is, what you paint your walls, what color you paint your walls also has an effect. If you are reflecting, if you have artificial lights in your house and you have yellow walls, that yellow is actually going to filter out a lot of the blue light that is reflecting off of the wall itself.
Oh, interesting.
And so there's this whole kind of untapped, maybe it's an art of how do we create a more ancestral home, something that matches outside more, bringing in palettes that you see outside and bringing them inside, and seasonality and everything. So the paint on your walls can have a huge effect on your circadian rhythm as well, because it's the light that's reflecting off of a white wall, for instance. And white walls I actually like, because if you have a lot of windows, you're bringing in that natural light, and it's reflecting around the room all of the natural light. And but then also black is nice in places where you don't want a lot of light. And we were joking around at the beginning about the shielded room and how it's like this like pitch black paint. There's actually a video on YouTube of this guy who paints a room with like the darkest paint that's available. And you go in there and he has a light bulb in there before he paints it, and you can see everything. But then he has one light bulb in there and everything's painted black. And then as soon as you cover up the light bulb with anything, the whole room is dark, because the black is just absorbing all the light. It's like this really bizarre experiment that he did. And he did another video where he painted it all like the brightest white color, and it was totally different. So it's interesting just even like just going and watching those videos to understand a little more about how light works. We think that we know a lot about it, but when you start to do these experiments and ask questions like, what is the natural spectrum outside? And you can look at it and see it with a meter and then try to match it inside. You just realize how far off we are from nature. You know, there's nothing that's ever going to replace going outside and getting that type of light versus going inside. But we try on these assessments to recommend the right types of bulbs for people so that they can more closely mimic what's outside.
Now, I haven't gotten to the lighting in my place yet because there's the place is all torn apart. But what are your current recommendations in terms of light bulbs? I just use thank God you can buy them in Texas because it's a little less communist than California, but because you can't buy the incandescent bulbs there on Amazon. They're like, sorry, we don't ship to California.
Oh, gosh.
Figures. God bless California, but good riddance for that one. So here I ordered a ton of them. But so in my house, and I suspect they have a little bit of green in them. I mean, they're not like red color or orange color. They're just like a, amber colored glass with an incandescent. And I just have those everywhere. And then in certain cases, I'll use like a red incandescent bulb on a couple lamps or something when I know it's going to be really late at night. And I don't want like any blue or any green.
Yeah.
In terms of flicker and color spectrum, are there any innovations? Has anyone come up with like better lighting than that?
Yeah, well, there's actually quite a few LED bulbs that we do recommend. And the ones that we recommend are flicker free. They have what's called a constant current driver in them. And so there's one brand that they do sell on Amazon called Sunlight, Sunlite. And they're non-dimmable orange, yellow, or red bulbs. And they're LEDs, so they don't have the full spectrum of infrared. But, at night, you don't really need your full spectrum near infrared therapy if you're just trying to block blue light and have some kind of light so you can get around and function a little bit before you go to bed. So those are about like 20 to 30 nanometers wide, but it starts off at I think around 630 nanometers and goes to like 650, somewhere around there. So it's a little bit wider of a red light than like a photobiomodulation device, an LED-based photobiomodulation device would be. But it's blocking out all the blue. And so, I like those actually when I travel because then you don't have to worry about the glass breaking on the incandescent bulbs.
Yes, I've had issues with that. I've swept up quite a few hotel rooms after dropping my bulbs trying to change them out.
Yeah.
It really sucks when that happens when you just arrived in the room and I'm like, okay, I'm going to get, while I'm still awake after that arduous flight, I'm going to get all the lighting dialed in and then I'm tired. And then I'm like, okay, now I have to look for shards of glass for the next 2 hours.
Yeah. That's something I ran into too as well. But pretty quickly, I realized also that the incandescent bulbs, they'll get really hot and you want them to be hot so that the filament heats up and it doesn't flicker as much. But some of these lower wattage bulbs that they sell that you can get, even like the orange colored ones or whatever, the spectrum might be good, but they actually flicker more because they're only like 60 watts or 25 watts or whatever. And we have one flicker meter that we use where you can actually hear the sound, and it sounds about like a 60 hertz flicker. So,
right.
So it's that the filament doesn't get hot enough and it cools down in between those pulses, those 60 hertz pulses.
Wow, that's interesting. So because I always thought the incandescent bulbs, like I'm good on the blue light and the flicker, but they can still flicker, huh?
Yeah, they still flicker. We recommend 100 watts or more for any bulbs that you're going to be using. Okay. And that does make it brighter. So usually we only recommend incandescent bulbs during the daytime, unless you're using something like the Sauna Space's photon bulb that's 250 watts, and it's got all the blue light filtered out with the red stained glass. And then that's kind of like a portable fire that you can just plug into the wall. It's completely
I love
shielded.
the Sauna Space lights. I have one in our apartment right now, just one of the little single lights, and I just keep it in the kitchen, and that's like my night light. and I'll just go up and like give myself a little red light therapy. And
it feels like you're just sitting at the beach.
It's such an awesome light. I freaking love those things. Okay, well, there's so much I want to cover. I don't want to get off in the weeds too much here. Okay, so they do have these flicker-free orange and red LED bulbs available now. What would you recommend for someone like myself that has a bunch of these ceiling can lights put in, and that's what the light switches go to? You know, if you wanted to fill the space, have you found anything useful for those?
I haven't got a very good recommendation for that. Right now, the only daytime...
A floodlight, I think that's what I'm looking at,
Yeah. The only daytime bulbs that we're recommending right now are these film grade flicker-free bulbs that are LEDs, but they're called waveform lighting. So if you go to waveformlighting.com, and they actually don't deliver to California either. I think it's because of Prop 65 or something like that.
I mean, I'm sure there's some not good reason for it that they're using as an excuse to make our lives crappy.
Yeah. One of my guys lives in Burbank, and he can't get them. He's like, can you send me one? And I was like, I don't want to get in trouble from California.
Right.
So it's like we have to deliver them to my friend in Arizona, and then they have to cross the border.
You know what you also can't buy there is like ozone generators, like air filters that use ozone.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, because I wanted to get one for my car, and I went on to put it in my cart, and it's like, you're blocked, so don't tell anyone, Amazon or legislation in California. But I just shipped it to my dad's, and then he shipped it to me. I win. So now I have ozonated kind of filtered air in the car. So those are a good option for daytime lighting when you actually do want bright light that keeps you awake and
right. Yeah. And what we would recommend is, between 10 and 2 p.m., you can use those. I call it task lighting. Like when you really need some bright light and you need to know what the colors are. So a high CRI, color rendering index light that is flicker free. That's what those waveform bulbs are. And they also have they have under cabinet lighting and flicker free dimmers that can go with those as well. And then we're looking into a few other companies that have circadian lighting, but a lot of the companies that have circadian lighting have problems with flicker in and of themselves, even if they're running off of DC. So we're looking at some low voltage lighting systems right now and trying to come up with a recommendation. I'm going to be actually assessing some of those products in a demo kit in a few weeks here. And,
cool. Keep us posted on that. Yeah, for sure. That would be awesome. I used to think that like natural lighting was when you have a lot of windows in your house and you're indoors. Would you explain what happens to light as it comes through glass that makes it not natural anymore?
Yeah, sure. So glass filters the light. It filters out the UV. It filters out, a lot of glass actually filters out the near infrared wavelengths. And you can measure this with a meter just by measuring through a screen versus through the glass. And ironically, a lot of the glass also blocks electromagnetic frequencies from like the wireless frequencies and everything as well, because it's got a silver coating on it. So I didn't tell you this, so surprise, there's a few windows in your bedroom that have low E glass in them, and we won't need to use the shielding film or curtains on them.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So those front ones right next to that door, the door that goes out to the pool, it has it doesn't have any low E in it, but those 3 windows there do. And so I'm thinking if we just shield that one window, we should get some pretty good results after we get the doors up and everything.
I was actually shocked at how much the radiation levels went down without doing anything to the windows, just from you guys doing the shielding painting. We went in there and it was, I think it's on Instagram somewhere on an IG story, or IGTV, but we went outside and your meters are like, red alert, the numbers like through the roof. We step inside, we're just on the other side of a glass door, and it's just goes to 10 or something, It was like almost non-existent. You guys weren't even done yet. Yeah. That was a very happy moment for me.
Yeah. That paint is just incredible, the way that it works. And, we're really just sealing off everything. And most of the radiation from the towers is coming from above and kind of like the top half of your walls. And we never recommend shielding like just one wall. There's a lot of professionals out there that do that. And I just think that's a little bit irresponsible to just recommend shielding one wall from wireless, because another tower, they're planning on putting up like 1 million more towers in the United States as they're installing 5G, like just in the next couple of years. And so, chances are that if you end up just shielding one wall, you're going to get one that's transmitting from the other side and reflecting back off your shielded wall and giving you a higher exposure than before. And that's why we recommend to do the full shielding of the entire room, because we want to rule out EMF as a problem so you don't have to worry about it anymore.
Yeah.
Like now that you've got your room shielded, you can always feel like, okay, no matter what's going on outside, I can always go back and have this healing time for 8 hours or more every night in my shielded space. And I'm golden. My body's repairing that damage. I'm giving my body a break from all the wireless, the electric fields, magnetic fields, everything. I'm just going in here and letting my body detox, get into that deep parasympathetic state. And that's your repair time. It's your recharge and repair time at night. And so many people, probably 99.99999, don't have enough nines memorized. Like people, they don't have that time. They are just going out and 24/7 bombardment, even while they're sleeping, and their body is just constantly on. There's this constant onslaught, and you don't ever have time to just relax. I think that's why so many in our society are just really anxious. I mean, there's many reasons for that. There's so many different types of toxins out there and things that we have to worry about. But just energetically, there's this anxiousness, this restlessness that we have. And one of the number one things that people say after they've shielded a room or they get in their bed canopy, they're just like, man, it's so quiet. It feels still in here. I don't feel like restless anymore. There's just this peace about it.
Yeah, I could feel that walking in the room the other day. I mean, there's no bed, no furniture, there's no floors, for Christ's sakes. But I walked in there and I was like, there's this, I don't know. It's like when you're out in the backyard, right? And it seems quiet. You're out there relaxing. And then someone turns off an air conditioner. And you go, oh shit, it's so quiet now. I didn't even realize it was on. It's that, I think EMF is that way. It's just so ubiquitous and we just kind of tolerate it and put up with it. And it's invisible. Obviously we can't see it or hear it, taste it, smell it. So it's really something you have no idea is there until it's gone. And then there really is a different energy. And we experience this when we go out, in the woods somewhere or something, right? Where wherever you go and your cell phone doesn't work, that feeling,
Yeah.
And to be able to have that feeling in your house is like, oh my God, incredible. So to back up a little bit, so cool that you added the light as a source of EMF and that you guys added that to your testing and also remediation. I think that's really smart. The next one, just maybe briefly, because there's a bunch of stuff I want to cover about like how you actually test for it and fix it, but run us through the other types of EMF too.
Sure, yeah. So, obviously the big one that people talk about a lot is the wireless radiation coming from your Wi-Fi router. There's smart meters that are electrical meters that are pulsing on your house, supposedly measuring your electrical consumption.
AKA spying on you.
And then, the cordless phones, cell phone towers, radio towers, television towers, all those things, wireless, that's another thing we measure. And, there's multiple meters that we have to use in order to delineate what's going on coming from the inside of the house versus the outside of the house. You can't get one meter that measures both very accurately. You have to have multiple meters to be able to kind of understand what's coming from outside, what's coming from inside, how's it interacting with your body as an antenna, and that sort of thing. So that's one type that's very common that people think about mainly when they think about EMF. They think about Wi-Fi and their phone and that sort of thing.
And this is also all of the, and I hate this term because it's so vastly incorrect, but smart appliances, smart technology. Yeah. As I've started to shop for appliances, I go into Ferguson's, the place where you get appliances here, and they're like, okay, so what are you looking for? I'm like, nothing smart. And they're like, really? But you can talk to your washing machine. Exactly. If I'm talking to my washing machine, who's listening? Yeah. That's the paranoid side of me. But just because I'm paranoid doesn't mean they're not after me. But no, in all seriousness, every refrigerator, stove, they're all emitting these Ring doorbells. I mean, it's like a smart home, if you really like had the money to dial it in, to me it's like a cancer pit. It's just the worst thing you could ever do, especially for like small kids and pets and stuff who have, a more fragile biology than a grown adult that's already kind of used to being bombarded. Yeah. What are some of the other like main offenders when it comes to RF that people are voluntarily bringing into the house, like baby monitors, stuff like this?
Yeah, baby monitors are a big one. The security systems, a lot of the things are convenience items. Even Sonos, the sound system.
Brutal.
I know you had one of those, and I think you figured out a way to disable the Wi-Fi at one point. But and they also, make it extremely hard to disable things. Smart TVs, our basic recommendation is to just get a device that you can basically unplug it with the push of a button, because there's no way to turn that setting off, even if you have it wired with an Ethernet cable.
Oh, really?
So you have to turn the power off to most of the devices. And now they're even creating Wi-Fi routers where you can't log in and turn off the Wi-Fi. It looks like it's off, but when you test it with a meter, it's still blasting. And you call Spectrum or whatever company is out there, whatever they call themselves, and they say that maybe they can turn it off remotely. Well, sometimes we've had customers who do that, and they say, okay, it's off, and then we're there testing, and we're like, no, it's not off. The signal's still there. They're like, well, it's my screen is telling me that it's off. It's like, well, that may be. Maybe it's not transmitting data, but it's still transmitting this Wi-Fi signal that's still damaging to the human body, and we're still perceiving this as a stressor. And so you really have to have a meter or somebody who can verify that the things are turned off in your home. That's really important to be able to do that.
Yeah. When it comes to, choosing to not have Wi-Fi, which I'm going to do is, thank God this house was built in 2001. So it's all wired for Ethernet in every room. It's like, God, thank God these guys were forward thinkers. I mean, that was probably badass at the time, right?
Everything. Because then you can have your Halo parties and with their Xboxes and everything in all the different rooms. I used to have a friend who'd do that every Saturday night. We'd go there and we'd have Halo LAN parties, where you're playing the video games in all the different rooms and you have teams and everything. But yeah, that was cool. I still think it is cool. Maybe it's going to come back. You know?
So I was stoked to find that. But then I guess I got to get an AV person in there that can get through that rat's nest of wires. But what I did in the past was I would run Ethernet, I think, directly out of the router and then just turn the modem off to stop the Wi-Fi. And then I would still have internet, but not Wi-Fi. Do I have that right? The modem and the router?
I think you'd need the modem on to get the internet.
Right.
And then you turn the Wi-Fi router off.
Yeah. So that's what I did at home. I just put the router portion of it on a timer. Mm-hmm. And actually I have it in the apartment now because just some nights I'm in bed and I'm like, I forgot to turn off the router. So now it just goes off at 11 p.m., comes on at 7 a.m.
Yeah.
But I think that's something that people that aren't real techie get confused about is they're like, cool, I'll get rid of Wi-Fi, whatever. Like I can hardwire my computer, but it's understanding like which of those two devices is which. And then in a case like mine, since there's, 7 rooms that have an Ethernet port, then you have to get like one of those little kind of junction boxes. I don't know what they're called, but they have, 10 Ethernet plugs in them. And then those would then go into the modem.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It would be a wired router or a switch.
Right. A wired router. Yeah. Right. That doesn't have the wireless thing. Kind of like like an office computer networking setup almost, right?
Yeah,
from back in the day. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So the RF, what do you think if you're in your house and you just have to have Wi-Fi on, when you're using your cell phone, that's getting pinged from multiple cell towers nearby. Mm-hmm. So it's bringing in radiation into the house, or I guess it's already there, but then you're also your phone is emitting tremendous amount of radiation. Is it better to just use your phone using Wi-Fi and turn it in airplane mode? If you want to have your phone near you and using it, would that be like less overall radiation coming out of the device?
According to the equipment, yes, it would be. But you kind of also have to remember that anything foreign is still going to be a stress response. And every individual is different in how they respond to these different frequencies as well. So, there's still even debate among a lot of EMF researchers whether the intensity matters more than the frequency itself, because there could be a really low frequency, and if it's the right frequency to cause biological harm to an individual, it could affect that individual more than an intense frequency, like just a few megahertz above that, or something like that. So the intensity, we're always looking at that, the intensity of the field, but we're also looking at the frequency and the individual, and it still does damage no matter what. But according to the meter, it's actually, I like, if I have to be connected on my phone, I prefer to be connected to a Wi-Fi network than depending on the data from the cell phone tower, just because it's using more power to reach the tower like a few miles away, just like you're saying, versus a router that's maybe 100 feet or less away.
Right. And I think you were telling me that when your phone has fewer bars, that it's actually worse. Because when I see my phone and it has 4 bars, I'm like, oh my God, I'm in such a shitload of EMF right now. But that's actually not as bad. Do I have this right? Because your phone, because there's a strong cell signal coming from a tower nearby, that your phone doesn't have to work that hard and therefore does not emit as much radiation as it would with 1 bar where it's struggling to keep trying to connect.
Right. So you got that phone right next to you. It's got full bars. That's probably the best time to make a call or to do work on the phone, because you have a full signal and your phone's not going to be working as hard to connect to the tower. Your battery's not going to drain as much in that environment versus an environment where you hardly have any signal. Then your phone's going to be blasting out a lot of signal. But if you have full bars, you also have to know that you've got probably surrounded by cell phone towers.
Right.
And if those are really close to you, then they're definitely causing a problem, So it's like a lose-lose situation in that way. Yeah.
I mean, the thing with this, and I noticed you're passionate about this, but you also are kind of lighthearted about it. And I just want to say before I forget, and I'll probably mention this when I record the intro later, that I think that it's double, if not more, harmful to be paranoid about EMF around you that you can't do shit about really most of the time, than to just like build an intelligent awareness and strategically over time start to make some lifestyle choices and give up a few of those little conveniences, like being able to talk to your stove or something.
Yeah.
But I know that I verge on the side of neurosis with it because I have a trauma of acute exposure that you're aware of. And I'm sure the audience is sick of hearing about. So when I see a cell tower, my initial response is like, oh my God, brain cancer. Like that's the first thought. And I'm like, drive faster, get past it. But then I realize, okay, now I'm eliciting this, sympathetic nervous system fight or flight response. I probably just had a spike in adrenaline and cortisol just because of that one minute thought. So it's like, it's one of those things where I think we have to approach it with, what's the word, like surrendered action, right? Mm-hmm. Where you're relaxed about it and you just take logical steps whenever possible. But you can't be, I don't think, if you really want to have health and vitality, so relaxed that you just, put your head in the sand and pretend like this isn't a major issue either.
And that's what a lot of people do. They'll either put their head in the sand about it, don't want to hear about it, or they'll not think it's not an issue and just completely ignore it, because the traditional science, which apparently is always correct about everything,
trust the science, Brian.
The science we see on TV and everything, it's, historically, conventional wisdom has always been turned on its head, it seems like, throughout history. And with EMFs, it's no different. In Dr. Mercola's book, EMF, which I helped consult on that book, he goes through the history of the tobacco industry and how it used to be healthy to smoke cigarettes, and doctors were recommending it. You saw those ads where doctors like, I smoke Marlboro or Camel or whatever it is,
Yeah.
And then later on, all of a sudden, oh no, well actually they cause cancer, Well, that's where we're at right now, I think, with this whole EMF topic is we've gone too far. There's so much money, so much more money in this than in big pharma and big telecom, and big tech than in big pharma. than in big tobacco. It's like mind-blowing how much. It's like trillions and trillions of dollars every year that are made in that industry. And so there's a big special interest in subverting a lot of the studies and the research on this topic. But that hasn't stopped scientists from doing the research. We have people like Dr. Martin Pall. We have, the Bioinitiative report, like hundreds and thousands of journals that are showing biological action, because of different electromagnetic frequencies. And, we tend to focus on the wireless, but there's other things inside your house that are eliciting the same inflammatory response that we're not even thinking about. We keep going back to that question. Okay, list all the EMFs. We've gotten through, I think, 2 of them now?
I know. We're an hour in and we've covered 2. So, okay, that's a good cue, actually. So the RF, the radio frequencies, it's non-ionizing radiation, right? And that's all the wireless stuff that we're talking about.
Yeah.
So to give people a bit of a takeaway, like make life a little less convenient and just get rid of as much of that stuff as you can. Put your Wi-Fi router on a timer if you have to have it. I found something actually online. I put in the EMF course documents, and I'll link to that course and hopefully this thing if I remember.
Mm-hmm.
I found on it's like a remote control that turns off a power strip basically, but they call it a Wi-Fi kill switch. Awesome. Like then that's even better than having it on a timer, because one night maybe I go to bed at 10 and I'm in that Wi-Fi field for an extra hour because the timer was set for 11, or I sleep in, or vice versa. So I kind of like that, just on your nightstand, like boop, turned off the router. I have my Defender Shield case on my phone. So at least if I'm holding the phone, 18 inches from my freaking brain and on speakerphone, which I never put it next to my head, obviously, which probably annoys a lot of people out in public. But then again, I don't talk on the phone a lot, but at least then the field coming straight at my head is minimized, right? I think it's like 99%. There's still radiation coming out of the back of it, but if you face it toward yourself, that's one more little thing. I have the Defender Shield thing under my laptop. I have, little tools that make a little bit of a difference so that I can still be in the world like a normal person.
Yeah, and it's little habit changes like that are cumulative. It adds up over time. If you're doing that every day for 15, 20 years, like using a laptop without the Defender Shield, then you're exposing yourself to, like say you work on the laptop 4 hours a day. That's 4 hours where you've got that on your body for 15 years every day. Is that going to have a biological effect? Maybe, maybe not. But I mean, what's the big deal about putting a little shield there to prevent something from happening?
Yeah, I actually like mine. It's like much bigger than my 13-inch MacBook. And so, and it has a little, it's really cool. The new one, it has a little hole where the trackpad is, but then it has covers for your wrist and your hands.
Oh,
so
nice.
It's like the only time your fingers and hands are getting fried are the fingers on the keyboard, and then when you're touching the mouse. But like where your wrists are setting is all shielded. It's pretty cool. And it's
nice.
It's big and clunky, but it makes a nice little kind of a lap stand for your laptop. Actually, just even if it wasn't shielding, I would use it because it's just more convenient in terms of just working around the house.
Right. Yeah.
There was something else I want to ask you. Oh, before we move on from RF, you talked about how shielding just one wall of a room could be problematic because of this ricochet effect, right? There's a cell phone tower we know on the west side of this room, so we're going to shield the west side of the room. But then we don't know that there's a bunch of neighbors' Wi-Fi routers, and there's a smart meter coming from the neighbor's house, and they just put up a new 5G tower down the street on the east, right? So it's going to come in and bounce around and ricochet and actually exacerbate the problem. I've always wondered with EMF shielded clothing if that's an issue. Like I wear either my Lambs or my Lila Tech beanie when I sleep every night because it also works as an eye mask for light. When I drive around downtown Austin in the 5G cesspool it is, I put on my EMF cap when I'm driving around. It's just a habit. I'm not like being paranoid. It's sitting there. I just throw it on. But I've always wondered, in my Lambs underwear I'm wearing right now, but I've always wondered if RF signals say come in under my baseball cap that's shielded and boing, 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 and get stuck in there and bounce around? Or do you think it's still better because it's at least not, it's kind of ricocheting away from my body mostly? Do you have a theory or any testing on that?
Yeah, I have testing and some kind of theories that I've bounced around ironically a lot. But I think really the main thing with EMF clothing, I'm not so concerned about the ricocheting and bouncing around inside. I don't think that happens too much. But what I am concerned about is that when you're putting metal close to your body and how like the size of the shielded clothing can actually cause a resonance phenomenon to happen. And so if the frequencies that you're being exposed to happen to be the same wavelength as the threads in your clothing, then the clothing will start to resonate at a pulsed frequency of radio frequency out a certain distance. And so it really depends on the environment where you'll see the net benefit of the shielded clothing. And that's why a lot of people who are electrohypersensitive, some will be like, I have to use my shielded clothing. It works when I go to the store, when I go to this place. And then others will be like, you know what? I can't wear it because it makes me feel sick. And that tells me that it's totally dependent upon the environment that the person's in, not necessarily that it's good or bad. It's just that, the clothing or whatever it is you're using, if it's an environment where there's like a FM radio station is the big one that has an effect on shielded clothing, then that's going to make it resonate sometimes as much as a foot to 2 feet out with a resonance phenomenon when you're wearing that clothing.
God, this gets so nuanced. It's so annoying. Like the physics of this stuff is really irritating. So say you've got like a great product like Lambs, who I don't think they have in a while, but they ran some ads on my show. I literally wear their underwear every day. I'm happy to promote them. And I looked at their testing before I promoted them. Like, all right, have you guys taken this into a lab in a Faraday cage and like tested it for real? What percentage of RF does it block? And it's like 99.99% of RF. Great, cool. I've seen the lab reports, the whole thing. Same with the Leela Tech. They make the hat and the t-shirt. And I said, when they reached out to me or I was introduced, I said, well, send me your lab results. Like, what's the percentage of blocking, et cetera? So you think when you hear something like that, well, I'm good to go. Because like you could put your cell phone inside my underwear and call it. It won't work. Like it's blocked technically. That's what you want. But what you're saying is there are other waves of frequencies that would then hit the metallic material and act as an antenna. In the same way, when I was a little kid in the 70s, if your TV wasn't getting reception, you would like add big pieces of tinfoil to the antenna to create more surface area of metal to bring in that RF
Or
field.
remember when you would even bring your hand close to the antenna, the reception would start to get better. That's because your body is acting like an antenna and it's resonating with those frequencies and retransmitting the frequency out a certain distance. And so as your hand got closer, it was actually retransmitting more field strength toward the metallic antenna.
Oh, wow.
And so our bodies are walking antennas, walking around everywhere. And I think it's really important for us to understand when we're looking at EMF shielding devices or a lot of claims that people are making when they're out there, a lot of the testing's done in a lab, and it needs to be done that way. That's one baseline, one way that we can study how effective something is. But we don't live in a Faraday cage. We don't live in a lab. We have all these frequencies that are going in all different directions, interacting with one another. And so that's just something important to be thinking about, and probably wearing shielded clothing in a low EMF environment is probably a net benefit, especially if you have your own device it's blocking the bulk of that frequency close to your body. Right.
Oh, right. So like if you're a guy and you have, a cell phone in your pocket and you have to leave it off airplane mode because it's an emergency call situation, then the radiation coming from that phone on your nards is going to be protected because there's a layer of that metallic shielding fabric in between your phone and said nards.
Right. Or if you're going to your friend's house and they're, you know that every time you go there, you start to feel sick because their Wi-Fi router is right next to the couch, and then you wear your no choice suit.
I forgot to give them a shout out. Thank you. I was on to the things I'm wearing right now.
Yeah, so you put that on. That's probably a better thing than sitting next to the Wi-Fi router the whole time, or whatever. So it becomes important to be able to measure it and take some kind of RF meter with you when you're traveling to understand, okay, is this in a type of environment where I should wear the clothing, or is it going to actually cause more problems? And usually, you can, most of us now have routines where we know where we go throughout the week, and when we're traveling, maybe it's going to be better to be fully shielded in something like that because of the frequencies.
Right.
Like I saw you using that full body suit, and also I saw Ben Greenfield doing it.
Oh, really?
And,
That's cool.
in his travels on the airplane. I think that's a great time to do it when you're traveling on an airplane and different things, because people's phones are all around you. You got like hundreds of phones. Just
so brutal.
Everyone's on their phone. Nobody's looking at each other anymore. They're just like this and with their mask on, and they're looking at this blue screen, all over the airport. And so, you've got all of this stuff going on. And then, to block all of that, I mean, the towers are kind of pretty far away from the airport so as to not interfere with the radar. And the radar from the planes is actually doesn't resonate very much with the clothing and that sort of thing. So I think traveling with it actually makes a whole lot of sense.
Okay, good. I'm glad, because the no choice thing that you're describing for those listening is a metallic hoodie that zips up all the way over your face. Like literally your whole face is covered, but you can still see through it. I mean, you couldn't read a book, but you can walk around. And that's what I use when I travel, when they bust chops about wearing a mask. Like they don't even ask me. Like I go through with my ticket to get on the plane, and they just look at me like an alien just walked up, and they're so dumbfounded by the weirdness of it that they don't even like hassle me. Whereas if I had a bandana on, they'd be like, sure, you need a surgical mask for a 99% survival rate thing that isn't even real. But anyway, I have that thing on, and people are just totally dismayed, and they just don't say anything. I keep waiting to get on a plane with that and having them be like, that's not a good enough mask. But my suspicion is that they think I'm super paranoid and that it's like an ultra mask, even though I'm not worried at all about a virus at all, of any type. Because they're just natural, and it's just part of being a human. And there's something called an immune system. But I have that thing on, and I think they think that I'm like following the rules extra good. You know what I mean? Yeah. And even in the plane, like I'll zip it down to look at my phone or something for a minute or eat some food, and then I put it back up. And I actually want to wear the no choice full head hoodie thing. It's just hilarious. Yeah. With some of the stuff, you just have to have fun with it. Otherwise, it becomes too depressing. Okay, that's really good information about all of that. So you don't personally wear any shielded clothing, though. I've noticed, at least. I haven't seen your underwear, but
yeah, you want to see? No,
no. Not when the cameras are on.
Yeah, no, I don't personally. I've had a lot of people send me stuff to try out, and I test it. And typically, the place where I live, I don't need to. I mean, I do quite a bit of traveling, and I probably will end up. Someday I'll end up testing things and coming up with the ideal layering that I want. But for now, I just kind of feel like without testing it, I just need to continue to live normally and not wear anything special just in case, something, because that antenna effect really is something that I've measured, and I don't feel completely comfortable with recommending shielded clothing at this point, personally. But I can see, the testing that I've done and the environments that I've taken all my equipment to and tested with pieces of shielding fabric, which is basically what shielded clothing is, right?
Yeah.
So we recommend shielding fabric for windows, curtains, and now we have a seamstress that builds these custom canopies for our customers.
Oh, are those canopies commercially available now? I remember you were working on that.
We're still working on getting a place where we can ramp up production.
Okay.
But right now we're only offering them to customers who've had a full house assessment.
Oh, okay. And that's a canopy that in lieu of shielding your whole bedroom, you would just put this shielding fabric canopy over your bed and have like a Faraday bed, basically.
Yeah. And so we've got this organic cotton and silver shielding fabric. It's the only organic shielding fabric that I think is on the market right now, actually. Oh, but cool. That's what we use to make the bed canopy and curtains for our customers.
Yeah. Is that the same fabric that you sent me a couple years back that I was?
Yeah. That one, the one I sent you was before it was organic, but now we sourced like a GOTS certified organic cotton.
Sweet. Yeah. That fabric is actually really nice too. It looks kind of like a gauze. Like it would make a great sheer curtain if for people. Imagine just on its own, you would never even know. And it's also very thin, so it's easy to have sewn onto like a backing of a thicker fabric. That's what you would do in the case of, just sewing it onto your existing curtains or something, right?
Yeah. And we have a sheer one. Now we also have a more opaque version.
Oh, cool.
As well. That's a little bit higher shielding effectiveness.
Cool. Okay, awesome. Let's see here. How are we doing on time? Hopefully good. I think we have some kind of time limit here today, but I guess I'll find out when they bust down the door and turn off the mics. Okay, so that's a pretty good dive on the RF, on the light. Let's briefly talk about electric fields and dirty electricity in there, and then magnetic fields.
Sure, yeah. So electric fields are something that a lot of people don't think about when it comes to electromagnetic frequencies and fields, because you're just thinking about Wi-Fi, what's traveling through the air, your phone, that sort of thing. But as you know, there's wiring in everyone's house, and there are these electric fields, these voltages that come off of the walls, because all of our homes are made with the wiring that is Romex, and it's unshielded wiring. And so the walls have minerals in them and semiconductive materials in the paint, and that voltage will spread throughout the entire like floor to ceiling.
Are you serious? I didn't even know that.
Yeah, and it'll come and it emanates out like a foot, 2 feet, like all the way to the middle of the room. Usually, in the middle of the room will be the lowest voltage, like because it's furthest away from the wiring that's in the walls. Now, in a lot of commercial buildings, they have metal clad wiring that's grounded, and when something is grounded and there's an electrical wire flowing through it, that field just goes out to the ground and then basically drains out. So it doesn't leave that conduit. Whereas a Romex wire, it just completely blasts through that and will electrify anything else in the area that's semiconductive, including your body. And your body is much more conductive than the wall. So you're going to be getting voltages from the wall. And if your bed's up next to the wall, against the wall, you're going to be getting a lot of voltages from that. And so in nature, our body voltage while we're sleeping, we don't, alternating current AC body voltage from the wiring in the walls is non-existent in nature. We don't have any alternating current in nature. It's all DC current from the ground. But we've pulsed this current so that it can travel farther. And that pulse current, like in 99.99999% of people's bedrooms, is causing a body voltage as much as 2 volts. We've seen as much as 15 volts on the person's body. And we want to see that below 15 millivolts. So that's like 0.015. And that's really important because if you just think about the way that electricity is impacting the body, it causes involuntary muscle contractions. It causes you to lose magnesium and calcium and different minerals. And it's something that stimulates you all night long while you're sleeping. So electricity is something that we should not be exposed to when we're sleeping. And that's why when we do the shielding of the room, the canopy has to be a groundable canopy, something that's going to block that electricity from coming onto your body while you're sleeping.
Oh, so if you built like a Faraday canopy and it was not grounded, then it just blocks the RF, but not the electric field. The electric field will go through it.
The electric field will energize the entire canopy.
Oh my God, dude. Oh, I'm learning. I thought I knew about this stuff. And I'm like, wow, I'm learning so much today. So, okay, say someone is not in a position to spend a few grand to like test and shield their whole bedroom. They're able to get the canopy and then ground that then to the grounding plug in the wall, I assume?
Yeah.
Would that be like the less expensive, like kind of temporary solution?
Well, it actually...
where it would cover electric and RF field?
Yeah, usually the solutions are the canopy or painting your room. And really, when it comes down to it, they're actually about the same price.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Sometimes painting the room is actually less expensive.
Oh,
so
snap. Okay.
Yeah, it just kind of depends, because the canopy, it has to be custom made, and right now, eventually I hope to get that price down a little further, but right now we're at a price point where it has to be where it's at. And doing the shielding of the room, though, we typically recommend 2 layers of shielding, but 1 layer of shielding will completely mitigate the electric fields as well, because it's grounded. The paint is grounded as well. And so you have all the walls, the ceiling, and then we also recommend doing the floor, which is what we did at your place. So your place is going to be a full-on Faraday cage with all this grounded material. Plus, you wanted to have a grounding therapy in there. And so there's a way that we have to hook that up specifically in order to, and we had to test all the outlets to make sure that this was going to be safe for you. But we found a way that we can set it up in your room where you're going to be able to get the DC without the AC voltage, because there was some micro amperage on your ground wire.
Really?
And so we have to use a special connector in order to stop the AC but let the DC through.
Oh, that's so interesting. That brings me to another good point. But first off, okay, I know what the next point is. This one, say someone can't deal with the RF, like they can't deal with the painting. They're just going to live with the RF, the wireless signals, okay, coming from inside the house from devices, outside of the house from cell towers. But they're like, well, I'm sleeping with my head 1 foot from my wall, which you say has this 60 hertz electric field emanating from it.
Yeah.
And I know anyone listening right now is like, oh, no wonder I get headaches and my sleep sucks, right? One, kind of rudimentary solution would be what I do when I'm traveling is I scoot down really far in the bed, or sometimes even pull the bed out away from the wall and kind of get my head at least further away from there.
Yep.
Is there any way that someone can just shield the electric fields on the wall behind their bed alone, if that's like all they can do for right now?
Yeah, you could do that. And then some people actually have metal in their bed, which we typically recommend against. But if you do, you can actually figure out a way to ground that metal. Any metal in your room, if you can ground it, it helps to sort of suck in those electric fields from wherever they're at and drain them out. That's good. And also, like you mentioned, moving the bed as close to the middle of the room as possible is helpful. And also unplugging lamps that you're not using while you're sleeping, and anything in the room that's plugged in if you're not using it while you're sleeping. That's a good practice, and that's usually going to lower your body voltage pretty significantly.
Cool. That brings me to the next point and idea is when it comes to electric fields, especially in your bedroom, is something that I did back in LA was installing the EMF kill switch that you guys have. And that allowed me with one little click of a remote to just poof, kill all the power in my room. And then when there were things like the Uller to keep my bed cold and the Air Doctor air purifier, I mean, there's a couple of things I just want and need plugged in the bedroom. But because I killed all the power, I just ran power into the bathroom that I didn't turn off the breaker for, and then put those devices far from the bed, but still back in the bedroom. So essentially I had killed all the power in the bedroom and left the power in the bathroom, and then was able to get the benefits of clean air and deep sleep from that cold.
Right.
So how do the EMF kill switches work?
So those, you get to pick the circuits that you want to turn off. And often there's more than one circuit that will turn off the power or that will affect the body voltage for your bedroom. So you have to get somebody to test that and see which circuits need to be turned off. And then you can do that with the push of a button and just turn off those circuits at night that you're, hopefully it's not going to be your fridge or some other, or like air conditioning or something else that you need to have on at night. But then sometimes that'll bring your body voltage down to a healthy level. But when you have a shielded room, like in your new place, the only purpose of the kill switch for you is really to just turn off the outlets of the lamps where you're at, which you could use that other Wi-Fi kill switch to do that in a shielded room.
Oh, right.
because you're just turning off the power to the cords.
You just have basically a remote control power strip. And then when you go to sleep, you just click and that turns off the 2 bedside tables. Because even when the room is all shielded, anything that you then plug into the walls carry an electric field on the cable itself, the power cable, and then in the device, like a lamp, radio, whatever it happens to be. Now that thing is emanating an electric field, even though the room's walls are shielded.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, it gets really tricky. It's a bit nuanced, and I'm sure people listening are like overwhelmed. So I'm just going to pause and say, this is why it's really important to hire someone like Brian from Shielded Healing. Again, I'll put his links in the show notes. There are people all over the world doing this kind of work. He happens to be the guy that I trust and just enjoy spending time with. So you've been the guy for me. But I think that the guesswork is what really throws people. And often people are probably doing things that are less than optimal, trying to figure it out themselves, right? Because you need really expensive meters. And as you said, different meters for different purposes. So that brings me to the next question. You know, having said that, like kind of don't try to figure it out yourself. But let's say someone wants a couple meters like I do when I travel. I have a couple just to get a basic reading on a hotel room. And I might want to locate where the router is with an RF meter and kind of go, you're getting hotter, you know, and know where to unplug it. Can you name by brand or model like a couple basic meters for the different types of fields that people could, you know, just get familiar with on their own?
Yeah, sure. So one that we recommend a lot, if you're just going to get 1 meter, I got that question all the time, so I finally decided to put one on my website. But if you're just going to get one, the ESI 24 is a great meter to start with because it has a higher sensitivity RF range. You can hear the frequencies and kind of get a better sense of what they are, if it's a Wi-Fi versus a cell phone tower. But it measures 3 different things simultaneously and then has a higher sensitivity wireless setting. So the 3 things that measures simultaneously is the wireless, magnetic field in triple axis, which is important to get a triple axis Gauss meter if you're measuring anything magnetic. Then it also measures electric fields. So you're able to just turn that thing on just with the push of a button and measure 3 things at once. And that's a great meter to have with you when you're traveling because you can quickly turn it on, see, okay, is there a magnetic field? Yes or no. Is the wireless really high? Yes or no. And usually the electric field is going to be high near the walls anyway, but you can sometimes even check and see, okay, does this hotel have metal conduit? Because a lot of commercial buildings have that. So you can check that as well. And that's a good meter. If you're dealing with a magnetic field issue and you're curious about power lines or wiring errors in your house, the Tri-Field TF2 is a good meter to have.
Yeah, that's the one I have. I like that one. It's really easy to use and it seemed to be pretty close in terms of what it discovered versus your super fancy equipment too. Like if I found a magnetic field that was a certain power, your way fancier machines kind of found a similar thing.
Yeah.
There wasn't that much a difference between the two.
Yeah. The readings are fairly accurate. It has a digital display. So if someone's dealing with that and we can't get to them right away because they're in an obscure part of the country or we don't have enough assessments in the area, then we'll tell them to just get the TF2 and then we'll kind of guide them through how to use it and that sort of thing on a distance console type of thing.
Good, thank you, because that's one of the most common questions I get as well. What meter should I get? And I'm like, you need $30,000. It's like it's a whole thing, man. I don't know. But back to the electric fields before we move on to the next 2 that we missed, or 2.5 if you include dirty electricity, is this idea of grounding, right? So years ago, I remember going to the, kind of the raw food conferences and stuff, and I started hearing, this is going back 15 years or so, percolating this idea of grounding sheets and these grounded sandals. I love my Earth Runners, great grounded sandals. People were putting grounding pads under their computer while they're working. The idea there being to mimic our natural way, again, going back to the ancestral way. This is why it made sense to me. I started thinking, well, every living creature since the beginning of time, with the exception of birds in flight, is always touching something grounded. They're always touching the ground or a tree or something that is conductive. And so I thought, well, I'm going to be grounded 24/7. So I grounded my bed, my car, my everything, right? And then I met you and you're like, well, that's true, but in antiquity, when everything and everyone was grounded, we weren't surrounded by electric fields.
Yeah.
So explain to people what the risk could be with grounding in the wrong environment.
Yeah, I think one really important thing for people to understand is that with grounding, we kind of lump everything together with electric fields and also like therapeutic grounding. And so you have to understand that grounding is good as therapy, but it's a completely different measurement than grounding to reduce electric fields, because grounding for electric field reduction is actually grounding as shielding. So there's two things. There's grounding as shielding.
Good point.
And grounding as therapy. The therapy is the DC current and voltage that you get from the earth that gives you the anti-inflammation, anti-inflammatory compounds, and that's what all the studies are based on. But then again, a lot of the studies that they've done aren't well thought out, and they're not actually even measuring the DC current or the DC voltage. They're just measuring AC, which doesn't make sense to me, because the whole point of grounding is to get the ions from the earth, right? So when you're grounding around electricity, there's this side thing that's happening around the AC electricity, where the AC electricity is attracted to the ground. And if your body's conductive and grounded, then it's going to use your body as a conduit to go to the ground and drain out of your body. Now, is that good? I don't know. Is it natural? No, it's definitely not natural, because this AC electricity is not natural. And you're probably still getting some benefit from the DC grounding. But let's be real, there's two things going on simultaneously there. There's the AC electricity that's going through you, but you're also getting DC. So it's best to be grounding. If you're trying to get a true ancestral grounding experience, it's best to ground not around AC electricity and voltage, near power lines, in your home, that sort of thing. That's if your home's not shielded. It's good. It's not as ancestral to ground in that environment versus going in the ocean or walking bare feet on the beach or on a hike or in some mud or at a spring or something like that. You're getting true ancestral grounding when you're out in nature, away from electricity, versus inside where you've got lights and walls that have electric fields emanating. If you're grounded to a grounding pad in that environment, you're still likely getting some DC, but you're also getting the AC that's basically treating you like a shield. It's using your body as a pathway to drain out. And so I think that delineating and understanding those two different types of grounding, like what grounding does, it's two different measurements. You're measuring DC and then you're measuring AC. And the grounding mats and pads do have an effect on the AC, but when you put your hand on a grounding mat, that's a classic test that's done, and you take your body voltage goes way down.
Yeah, that's what sold me on it.
But why?
I was like, oh, cool. Then I have no body voltage. That's natural.
Yeah. And it is natural. But you have to think about what's actually going on. Did the fields go away? No. All it's doing is it's grounding the lead that you're touching, because your body's now grounded. And so the meter is actually designed to measure the difference of voltage between the ground and another object. And so if you're holding that, instead of the voltage going through, like when you're not grounded, the voltage is going through your body to the meter, and it's testing the difference between that. But when your body's grounded and you touch that grounding mat, all the voltage goes through your skin to the grounding mat instead of through the meter. So it just takes a different pathway.
Oh, wow.
And it doesn't register on the meter at all. So it doesn't change anything about your exposure environment. It's just you touch that grounding mat and so all of a sudden the reading goes down. It doesn't go down because you're not exposed. It goes down because it changed the direction that it's going.
Oh my God, dude. You just debunked so many YouTube videos about grounding. Now, is it possible, and I'm just going to put myself out there in a vulnerability of saying something really stupid. Is it possible, okay, that I'm in an electric field, right? These mics are plugged into the wall. There's an electric field around me, and I get a grounding pad right here that's plugged into the ground of the wall. And I'm, testing the skin voltage thing with the meter, and I touch the grounding pad and it goes to 0. Is it possible that rather than that AC current is now going through me down to that grounding pad, and nullifying the signal, is it possible that the DC current overrides the AC and it's like chasing the AC back to from whence it came? Is that like totally not in the laws of physics?
Well,
possible?
you can measure both at the same time, and I've done that. So I can see the DC.
You see what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. You can see the DC going up, but you can have something that's grounded that's got some AC current on it still. That's what the pipes are in everyone's house that have the magnetic field. It's got AC current flowing on the pipe, but there's no AC voltage. And there's DC current on the pipe as well. So they can coexist simultaneously for sure.
So one doesn't cancel the other one out. So my theory is...
No, it doesn't cancel it out, but the grounding will shield and block the AC voltage from going to the other side of it, because it will basically drain it out.
Got it.
And that's what we've tested, and anybody that has a multimeter can also test the DC voltage and the DC current of your body when your feet are grounded, and you can verify that, when your feet are wet, that's better grounding. And when you're in the ocean, that's better grounding. You get more DC amperage from the ocean when your feet are wet, or when you have more surface area connected to the water.
Okay, how about this one? Say I'm wearing my Earth Runners grounded sandals. Shout out to Earth Runners. I love these guys. They put a little copper peg on the bottom of these sandals, really thin Vibram sole, and then they have conductive thread in the straps. Awesome. So you don't have to be barefoot and cut your feet or step in dog shit or whatever else you wouldn't want to step in.
Petroleum, chemicals, pesticides,
yeah, totally.
herbicides.
Roundup, yeah. I know. I never like to walk barefoot on lawns. Like we live next to a golf course now, and my dog wants to roll in it, and I'm like, no, don't have fun. I'm like thinking they probably spray it with Roundup. But okay, so say I'm in an electric field based on your testing. I was going to say theory, but really based on your testing. And again, going back to what's natural, not natural for you to be the ground for an electric field. Got it. Mm-hmm. What about RFs? What about when I'm walking around my neighborhood, not near any electric fields, no AC, I'm not by any power lines, but there's still just ambient radiation in the air from the cell tower? Would it be better to be grounded than not? Because the RF is not going to use my body as a conduit to find the ground, because it doesn't operate like that, right?
Right, yeah, it's totally different. So there's some misconceptions. There's some people that say grounding all of a sudden makes your body a Faraday cage magically, and then it bounces off all the radio frequency. But, they ground the antennas that produce the radio frequency, and if that was the case, then maybe those wouldn't work, or you can still be grounded and get a cell phone call, So, and I've measured people's RF body voltage when they're grounded, and it doesn't change whether you're barefoot or have like 1-inch thick rubber sole shoes. So it doesn't really affect radio frequency. The nature of radio frequency is very different. That's why you don't have to have a Faraday cage grounded to block radio frequency at all.
Oh, right.
You can have that phone pouch and your cell phone goes dead just putting it in there. You don't have to get a ground cord and ground it for it to work. It will block because it's shielding it, and it's completely surrounded in a conductive material that's blocking the correct wavelength of whatever frequency you're trying to block.
Makes sense. Now, what about biohacking the car? I think I've shared a few of the things I've done.
I saw your straps on there out in the parking lot.
So this is something like I've been working on for years, and that is basically finding ways to help with the EMF in my car. Now, an easy way would be to buy a 1956 Ford or something that doesn't have any of this crap in it. My car is like a radar detector supercomputer. It's horrifically, just polluted with EMF. So years ago, I found that you can get these conductive straps that you get bolted to the frame of your car.
Uh-huh.
And when you're on a conductive surface, it grounds the car, right? So I figured that's great. So the electrical field within the car, all that static electricity is going to dissipate out of that ground. They have them on buses and stuff like that for, static electricity drag. It actually increases your gas mileage due to the drag of static electricity. It's cool stuff. Then I thought, well, if the car's grounded, I should put a grounding strap in the car. So I had my mechanic wire into the same ground that those straps are, and then I would drive around with my grounding straps on. until you told me about grounding in an electric field. So now I don't really do that much and they just kind of sit there.
Yeah.
I also have a Soma Vedic. I always have this thing near me. I have one of those, their travel one. I have the Blue Shield scalar generator. What else? I mean, anything I can think of. I have the biogeometry little sacred symbol things and anything I can add to the car to make the field more harmonious because I get super like road fatigued in that thing.
Yeah.
What do you think about grounding the car itself or my actual like skin grounding to the car's ground?
I actually haven't tested that, but I know that the cars, they have a battery. They're running on a battery. They do have an alternator, which can cause some AC voltage in the car that you can measure with a multimeter as well. So cars are really problematic. It's hard to hack them. And I've only done a little bit of experimenting. A few years ago, I did a consult for one of those Mercedes Sprinter van companies that they retrofit those Mercedes Sprinter vans, and they had like a shielded version that they wanted to work with me on. And more problematic than the electric fields, I think, is really the magnetism that comes from the motor and the wheels spinning in the cars, because you're getting like 6 to 10 milligauss. Even it doesn't have to be an electric car or a Tesla or anything. It's just a normal car. You're getting magnetic fields. And a lot of people are concerned about the Bluetooth and the Wi-Fi in there. And that is problematic in newer cars and everything. But the magnetic fields, I think, are like the biggest thing, especially when you're on road trips. For the drivers in the driver's seat.
When I tested mine with that tri-field meter, I mean, all the way to where your body is from underneath where the pedals are, I guess coming from the engine, the magnetic field, it like maxes out the meter. It's so brutal. So I wondered, of course, as I tend to do, if there was a way to get, shielding magnetic fields is requires much thicker kind of material, right? It's not something you could wear in clothing, for example. But I wonder if there's a way to like take out the carpeting, down by the floorboards and like install some sheets of that metallic material that will block magnetics, or even just, you might have to take the motor out of a modern car to get to that wall that's like between the dash and the motor, but to line that with some magnetic shielding to stop it.
Yeah, we'll have to take apart your car. We can do it, but we'd have to take it apart and have someone put it back together.
But honestly, when I go on road trips, I get smoked. I mean, it's like jet lag to me. Even driving out here to Texas, I mean, after an 8-hour drive, I'm like the worst brain fog. I can barely talk. I get super irritable. I'm like not a fun road trip.
But at least you had your meat in the freezer. Right?
I did. I salvaged the meat. Yes, I did.
Have you told your audience about that?
Yeah. I told them I did a solo show about the trip out here. Yeah, and I still have it. Funny thing about the meat, dude, is
we had it. It was awesome.
It's good, right?
Yeah, it's really good.
So I gave you guys a couple steaks, and I told you, but I'll tell the audience. So I drive out from California to Texas. I have to plug in our freezer at every hotel. I get an extension cord. I have to talk to the manager. Like, I will not let this meat spoil. It's beautiful meat. And, I bought a quarter steer from, I think it's called Covenant Pastures in Bakersfield. And then a bunch of it was from Belcampo. And I just don't want to, honestly, not to sound sappy, but I don't want those animals' lives to be in vain and just let it go bad. I mean, it just sucks. And it was expensive too. So anyway, I get here, it makes it to the garage. It had thawed out a little bit, but it was still safe, according to me. And then the GC comes in with his crew and starts demoing the house. And I go over there one day to grab a steak, and they had turned off the goddamn, it made it to the house and they had turned it off, and it had started to thaw like on the top level.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, like God really does not want me to eat this meat or something. Am I supposed to be vegan or what? But I did salvage it, but it was quite a journey. Well, man, Brian, there's a couple more things I wanted to cover with you, but we're running out of time here in our studio. I think we got to just about everything.
Well, we could touch on dirty electricity real quick.
That's the one thing, the dimmer switches and the dirty electricity. Let's just cover that, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah. So there's different types of, the more frequencies that we have exposure to, the more our body is having to deal with. So we've already got all the wireless signals. We've got the 60 hertz electricity, but then there's certain devices in the house. There's CFL light bulbs, the fluorescent light bulbs, old twirly, curly ones, and the tube lights, and then solar panels. A lot of these different devices and some appliances and even televisions, when they're on, they'll create all of these thousands and thousands of frequencies that actually ride along your electricity, along the wiring in your walls, and it causes a stress response, and it affects your blood sugar. It raises your blood sugar and your cortisol levels, and can cause, you to have, problems, whether it's just a heightened stress response or, there's a lot of studies that show relationship to cancers and different things like that. And so this dirty electricity can be filtered. And that's what we installed at your house in LA, was that dirty electricity filter that filters the entire house right where the electricity comes in. And then there's also some filters you can use to the plug-in filters, like the green waves, I think is the kind that you use. And those are good.
I got the black ones from you.
Oh, you got the static plugins?
Static, yeah, yeah.
So those any of those plugins work pretty well. It's better to have a grounded version than a non-grounded version. But whether you do the green waves or the static plugins, those are more like spot treatments. So if you think of like the house more like a whole house water filter, you got to filter at the source which is
the Power Perfect
which
box.
is like where the Power Perfect box would be.
Yeah.
So you're filtering all the dirty electricity. But then there's some things in the house that can cause contamination. And that's where you might want to use the spot treatment of like the static plugin or the green wave plugins in those locations.
Cool.
And so you have to filter those out. And that's more of a daytime solution, because at night we're trying to either turn off the power or create a grounded Faraday cage so there's no electric fields coming in anyway. And so you don't really have to worry about dirty electricity, because it's blocking the wireless, the electric fields, and the dirty electricity when you're shielding an entire room or you have a canopy in the bedroom. So
cool. Excellent. Nicole, are we out of time? That was the signal you're giving me? Okay. Because I just thought of 5 more questions. We'll do a part 2 and a part 3 and a part 4. I'm sure every year we'll have to do one of these and keep going. Man, thank you so much for your expertise. What I love about you, Brian, is your commitment to the work, your integrity, honesty, that you won't promote anything that's not scientifically valid and tested for. There's a lot of stuff in the EMF space that gets a little wonky in that way. I tend to lean a little more on the energetic side and all of that. And you humor me with that. But also the fact that you come from a place of biology and doing the work that you did with people on their health. And I think that is really, at the end of the day, the purpose of this is to find ways for people to have more health and vitality and longevity. So thank you for your work. And more than anything, man, thank you for your continued efforts for me to learn, and also just to safeguard the places that I'm living in, what will be my future podcast studio once that's built and stuff. So it's just fun to work with you and learn from you, and to see your business and your knowledge base grow. Where can people find your websites if they want to hire you and your consulting team and mitigation team? You guys are actually now doing the work, not just testing, but like you doing for me, you guys will do for other people. How do they find you? Yeah,
shieldedhealing.com. And typically we don't actually do the work.
Oh,
honestly.
I didn't know that. Sorry.
Yeah.
Psych. Never mind, guys.
But we will help guide the local contractors through the, all of the steps and everything.
Oh, cool. So you'll do the testing, you create a protocol, and then someone in it does the work according to your protocol, getting the grounding tape right and all the details.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah,
wow. I feel so blessed. Thank you.
Yeah. Shieldedhealing.com. And we have like 4 people full-time besides myself, and then my assistant that travel around all of the United States. And we're doing a lot of assessments for schools and hospitals now too that are into this.
Oh, nice.
They're really
so
into
smart.
the wellness industry, and they want to protect their schools and people that are chronically ill at these hospitals, getting all these special vitamin C IV treatments and treating Lyme and co-infections and cancers and all things like that.
Oh, that's great, man.
So,
yeah, every time I go to a hospital, I think, man, this is the worst EMF environment I've ever been in. It's like where sick people go, and it's like the worst EMF ever, man. It's crazy.
Yeah.
A lot of them have cell towers on them too.
Oh, it's terrible. Yeah.
Schools, hospitals, and churches. I'm like, really, guys? I guess they need the money, So they're like, they rent out the space.
But they don't know any better. It's sad.
It's barbaric. Well, thank you for your work. Thanks for coming on again. And more than anything, thanks for coming to Austin and hooking up the house, dude.
All right. You're welcome.